I'm Helen Fry, and I was diagnosed with LAM in May 2009 at the age of 42. Apart from thinking that I wasn't fit and don't go out running or anything like that, I didn't know that I had a problem until I had a spontaneous pneumothorax a few days after a flight home from New Zealand, where I'd spent my time coughing and becoming more and more breathless. Unfortunately, the doctors missed it, so for 2 weeks, while I got more and more out of breath, I was initially told there was nothing wrong. Then one Friday night I was told that I'd got heart failure at the age of 42 and to go on to diuretics. And finally they decided they'd send me for a chest x-ray. But there'd be nothing on the chest x-ray, it was just a formality. So off I went on the Tuesday morning early to get into the radiography department, thinking I'll be back at work within an hour or so, to be told, "Are you out of breath, Mrs. Fry?" So, yes. Yeah, you've got a collapsed lung, as he walked me round to A&E. Now, I'm a veterinary nurse, and I know how drastic that is, but at that time it doesn't sink in. And they sat me down on a chair, and while I'm trying to ring home, they've got me into resus. And I'm, God, that was quick. You never get through that quickly. So I was taken into resus and a drain put in, and my husband duly called, and it all happened so quickly, so I didn't really know what was going on. Luckily for me, the chest consultant, who then started asking me all sorts of questions like, was I on the contraceptive pill, did I have kids, etc., etc., had met Simon not all that long before, which was sheer luck for me, because he referred me to Queen's Med. And still I didn't really take on board what was going on because everything had happened so quickly. So when I got this letter saying I needed to go and see Dr. Simon Johnson, I'm okay, and off we trotted. But it was from the scan results, which also actually showed that I'd got an AML on my right kidney, and obviously seeing Simon that I was diagnosed with LAM. So a bit shell-shocked and not really knowing what I was up against, we came out of there absolutely, well, we don't know if this is good, bad, or whatever. Now, I have to admit, I was another person that didn't know these two were married. Because Simon is so good at sort of keeping things neutral that he said to me, "Are you going to Google this?" Now, my husband's a veterinary surgeon and I'm a veterinary nurse, so we're quite medically minded. Don't Google it, but there is this lady at LAM Action, and she can provide you with information. And they do, yeah. And they do, you know, they'll give you the correct information. So I said, okay. So had the telephone number, and again, it took me a few days to muscle up the courage to ring. You can make all the excuses in the world of why you're not going to pick up the phone. But boy, when I did, that was no problem, because Jan was on the end of the phone and saying, right, okay, I'll send you out the information. We have a meeting in a couple of weeks. If you feel up to coming, I'll get somebody to ring you as well. And yes, very calming effect. So I came to the first meeting in 2009, having only been diagnosed for a couple of weeks, still not really knowing what I was getting into, but decided that having got the diagnosis, that I'd come to a LAM Action meeting, get the information I needed and leave. I didn't want to get involved with groups or anything like that. In fact, I didn't want to stand with a load of women that were going to be sobbing in a room going, woe is me, how wrong can I be? I'd got 2 children of 10 and 7, and I was just in despair and thought, right, I'll come, I'll do this Saturday, and then off I'll go. That was wrong, because I met up with several people and we all started chatting, and we were all on our first meeting here, and we've carried on keeping in touch. So since then, I've had my ups and downs as well. In 2010, I then had emergency spinal surgery for a disc pushing against my spinal cord. The symptoms were over a few days, bank holiday weekend, that I started losing feeling in my bottom and down my legs. And the consultant at the hospitals, having no knowledge of LAM, said, well, you have to stay as you are, because if I put you on the table, you're going to die. So I spent one night in hospital sobbing and writing goodbye letters to my husband and my children, because it was after 5 o'clock and they wouldn't do anything at the hospital. So the next day, my husband and I requested that they speak to Simon, and we'd be guided by Simon and the anaesthetist as to what we were going to do. Not only did LAM Clinic pull out all the stops, because when I rang first thing in the morning, Simon said, just give me 2 minutes to pull your file and your last lung function. But he educated the hospital staff, and the anaesthetist came to speak to me and said, it's fine, we're all set up ready, at least we know what we're dealing with, and we'll carry on. And also, on top of that, Simon then rang me after the surgery while I was connected to a morphine pump. It was an interesting conversation, probably a bit one-sided at the time. But, you know, it just showed the caring of the man as well. So I have him to thank for literally standing here. I've had varying visits to A&E where I've had odd chest pains and thought, there's a lung gone again. And I now carry my LAM file with all my contact details and my information sheet. In fact, one doctor said, oh, can I bring everybody in, you know, and look at your chest, if you must. But, you know, there you go. So, today's 7 years on, where am I? I go for my regular lung function tests and kidney scans. The children are now 17 and 14, and I feel blessed that, you know, things have worked out as they have. I'm still running a veterinary practice with my husband, but I have decided to look at alternative routes as well of income, because my main problem had been fatigue. So I set up a health and wellbeing company that I initially got involved with from the animal side for looking at products for animals, but soon learned that these products can be used for humans too. So the products have enabled me to manage my LAM better, and the business has given me a different outlook on life as well. Going back to 2009, as I say, I didn't intend to cross paths with LAM patients or become a lady that lunches. But how wrong was I? Any excuse for get out and have a lunch. So I now work with the lovely Fiona Norton on our Forever Living business. We have coffee or go out to lunch when we can. Those of you that know Fiona, all her meetings are done by coffee and cake. Are we going to indulge in cake today? We meet up with other lammies on a regular basis as well. Once or twice a year, we catch up, swap in notes and gossip and have a giggle, and actually come away feeling positive, which is all the things that I didn't think would happen. For new or old patients listening today, I would like to give you just a few top tips. One, use the support of LAM Action, and I know that's been said a lot today, and I did write this before I attended. The people here today inspire, support, and really do care. Take on board the information that you're ready to accept at this time and relevant to you. Don't worry about further down the line or what any other patient is doing, or they're doing this or they're doing that, because, again, as it's been said, everybody is different. And it's important to remember that we're all different and LAM affects us in different ways. Learn to deal with the now, not what might happen. I'd finally like to take the opportunity to thank some people. LAM is one and all for being an inspiration. My good friends Fiona Norton and Jill Epton, who have always been there even on my down days and listened to me, even if we've come out of a meeting and sitting in a car park and I'm going, oh my God, it's all going wrong. And Simon and Jan Johnson for their unwavering support over the years. My family have supported me as well, and just thank you for listening.
Afternoon, everybody. My name's Kate Burrows, and I feel like while we're on the subject of confessions, I have to confess that I didn't know that Jan and Simon were married when I first found out about LAM action. So get that off my chest. Anyway, I'll be fairly brief because I only found out at 9:30 this morning that I'd be talking this afternoon. So apologies in advance if it's a bit... if I wing it a bit. So I sort of looked at the title and thought, my LAM journey, what's my perspective? And what's my personal perspective? And I think for me, my perspective on LAM started a long time before my LAM diagnosis, started 20 years ago, when I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a blood cancer. And it actually started with a collapsed lung, but this was due to fluid rather than air, so it wasn't pneumothorax, it was a pleural effusion. In medical terms. Long story short, I survived that fine. I was back on a rugby pitch about 3 months after finishing all my treatment. And I thought, I have done my serious big illness for life. Thank you very much. Tick that box, move on. So imagine my surprise when in 2010, my lung collapses. And this time it's a pneumothorax, so it's air. But to me, of course, I'm freaking out because I'm thinking the cancer's come back. Anyway, took the air out, went away. A few months later, the right lung, and it's always the right lung, collapses again. So CT scan later, cysts are found on lung, and I have a diagnosis of something I can't even spell or pronounce. So, like lots of other people here, that is when, after a short space of freaking out again in my life, I found LAM action, I found the lovely Jan and Simon. And again, like a lot of people, I went from feeling completely discombobulated and afraid to feeling much more calm and reassured. And after my first LAM meeting here, much more positive about the fabulous treatments and trials and all the research that's going on. So that was wonderful to then be part of this amazing LAM community. So as Frank said, LAM is somewhere between a cancer and a wart. Well, I've had cancer, I've got LAM, I'm hoping I don't get the warts. Those of you that were here 2 years ago remember I also talked about my experience of pregnancy and LAM. So knowing I had LAM, we decided to get pregnant, or rather we didn't, because we couldn't decide whether or not to or not, so we just left it to chance and got pregnant. So I now have a 4.5-year-old called Harry, who's a complete menace. So I actually have also experience of pregnancy and LAM. So my journey so far has been an amazing ride, and I've learned so much from it. My pregnancy wasn't without its problems. I had a pneumothorax that popped up about 3 months in, and this is when my hotline to Simon began again with lots of calls around what do I do, but I got through the pregnancy and the rest is really history. So 6 years on, where am I now? My lung function, luckily, touch wood, I've been in this all day, has been stable really since my diagnosis through pregnancy and beyond. And I had my last lung functions at the Brompton a few months back. And again, my lung function is stable. So I feel really, really lucky about that. There's some good things in my life, and that's one of them. And I've also been working really ever since my diagnosis, so pleurodesis aside, and obviously a small gap for maternity leave. I love my job, I love what I do, I'm a management trainer, and so I've worked all the way through. And I don't really think my husband Alex would let me not work, even if I did want to be a lady of leisure. And I think also, I don't think my sanity would cope with that. I think I love being busy and working. So I love my job, and about 2 months ago I actually went freelance. So I'm really enjoying my new life in the world of freelance work, which is brilliant. And I'm loving motherhood, and that's kind of where I am now. So when I sat earlier on and thought about what's my perspective on LAM, I think it goes all the way through my life, from my first diagnosis of a horrible illness that I didn't really want. And I think there are three things. I feel lucky, I feel positive, and I feel absolutely, as Frank said, I feel focused on solutions and living, not problems and dying. So I feel lucky. I mean, a lot of people said to me when I was diagnosed with LAM, oh my God, you're so unlucky, you've had cancer and now you've got LAM. And I said, well, no, I can't feel like that. I feel lucky to have survived cancer and to have a curable form of cancer. I feel lucky that I've got stable lung function. I feel that's a gift, and I'm worried all the time it might suddenly start to drop. I feel lucky to have my little boy in my life that I love. And I feel really lucky to be part of this fantastic LAM Action community and all the people and the support that are around me and all my friends. I feel positive, and I think that positivity is really important in overcoming illnesses like this and like cancer. And I know when I had lymphoma, a lot of my doctors said your positivity is really part of your cure, and I really do believe that's important. And I think also there is so much to be positive about with LAM. I mean, you only had to look at Frank's talk earlier to know there is so much going on. It's a hugely positive world, and every time I come here, I have another injection of positivity about all the research that's going on, all of the trials, and the fact that we've already got a treatment, and let's keep going and find a cure. So I'm hugely positive. And then focused on solutions and living, not problems and dying. I think my perspective is that life is for living, and when you have a serious and seriously horrible illness, then it's really doubly important to think about what you do have and not about what you don't have. And you have to focus on that. In terms of solutions, I truly believe that it's up to us as members of the LAM community to put ourselves out there to do anything we can to help each other and to help find a cure for LAM. So it's up to us to raise awareness, it's up to us to raise money, it's up to us to help other people with LAM, particularly those who are newly diagnosed, because we all know what those days feel like. Helen talked about it earlier, all of us did. And also help further the research. So to that end, you know, I've got stable lung function, so I said to Frank earlier, if I can help with the mild trial, then great. But I'd also like to put my name down for the red wine trial as well.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Audrey Ferguson, if you don't know me already, and I'm from Perth in Scotland. So I don't know if I've done the record journey today or not to come here, but it's certainly quite a journey. Jill and I were going to sort of do one jointly together, just to give the perspective on having had a transplant. I was diagnosed back in 1997. I think Jill was similar, maybe just a wee bit earlier than me. At that time, things looked fairly bleak. We didn't know a lot about LAM. LAM Trust, as it was, just started that year. So we did feel very much isolated at that time. And I must say, coming today, it's so much more positive, listening to the talk on all the trials that are ongoing, the things. And when we were fundraising at that time for things, I suppose in the back of my mind, I thought, will they ever come up with anything to help with LAM? Well, here we are today, and sirolimus seems to be having such an effect on so many patients. So even in the time I've been coming, yes, we have come up with something, which is wonderful and so encouraging. So I don't really want to go through my whole story because we're probably running out of time. If you want to read the full story, the book is there, kept safely kept. Adrian tells me there's still 3 copies left there, so hopefully you'll find that interesting. My story was pneumothoraxes, and I was diagnosed very quickly, thankfully, by my consultant, which I'm very grateful for. As I say, the prognosis at that time was not good at all. And told there's no treatment whatsoever, you know, so that's what you're looking at ahead. But we were helped through these years, and in 2008 I got my lung transplant. It was a single lung transplant. It was quite a rough time at the time, I have to say. There was quite a lot of complications after the transplant, and I spent 25 days in intensive care. And with, you know, quite a lot of things to overcome. If you'd asked me in the first 3 months, was I glad I had my transplant, I might have struggled to answer that one. But 8 years on, I would say definitely, it has been wonderful. And my quality of life now is so much better. We do regular holidays and we're very involved in the church, so we've run youth camps and all sorts of things. And having said that, I was still doing that with LAM before my transplant. But certainly much more energy to do things now. And I would totally agree with Kate saying, whatever you're going through, try to think positively. I'm not one of these inspirational speakers, but I do think there's a huge power in positive thinking, rather than saying, what am I missing out in? Others my age are doing different things, to look at what is positive in your life and emphasise the positive things. And even just before transplant, when it was a struggle just to shower and go out for the day at all, get to the car, I would pat myself in the back saying, well done, Audrey, you got into town today and you got your mobility scooter, and just whatever is positive, just think what you've achieved with whatever lung capacity you have. But what I would say about lung transplant, it's great. If you can avoid it, do. I think it's so much more positive now to see the treatment you can get, and if that's stabilising your lung function, that is so much better than looking down the transplant route. But if you do have to go that way, the staff at Freeman's are wonderful. I know that's where I had my transplant, and Jill too, and they just could not have done any more for me. I've had a very supportive husband. Adrian told me to say that. And it's great to have all these supports. It's very important through your journey, and I hope you all have that support as well. But I'm not going to hog the show. I'm going to hand over to Jill.
Because I don't have very much to say that others haven't said already, except probably just to emphasise when I was had my first lung problems. That was 1987, so quite a few years ago now. I was 22 years old at the time, and had several collapsed lungs, having been in the Himalaya climbing. So, it was sort of, well, that's your fault for going to the Himalaya and trekking up at 15,000 feet. So, my lung problems at that stage weren't really taken terribly seriously, although I did have quite some serious surgery to stop it happening again. But my formal diagnosis was 5 years later, in 1992. So the year that I had my first lung problems was the year they did the first lung transplant in Europe, 1987. It's that recent. So when I was diagnosed, it was still early days in transplantation, and that was not offered to me as a potential option at the time or some kind of saviour. It just wasn't out there, and obviously sirolimus was even further away. So as Audrey said, the future then, there didn't look as if there was going to be much of a future, and that side of things was probably, throughout my illness, was probably the hardest thing to deal with. Probably the psychological aspects of having LAM have been far, far harder than the physical side. The physical side you can kind of get through, but that gnawing away, the psychological side, is very difficult. And I still, certainly in the Scottish medical community, there isn't a huge amount of support on that side, or even recognition of how difficult that can make things. So, I would say to all of you here, I'm a very naturally optimistic, happy person, but I had some real depression, anxiety, which just took me, I was so surprised, because I'm just not of that tendency, but it was quite clear with the kind of prognosis that I got and what was dealing with day to day, that was quite natural. So, just if there's anything just to bear in mind, be aware that can be a problem, but it's also a problem that can be, there's lots of treatment for that. So, make sure it's recognised and supported as well. That would be one tip I have. For those of you who don't know, I then went on to have a transplant in 2004. So 12 years ago now. And like Audrey, it was at the Freeman in Newcastle. And I'd say, so looking back over all these years, the the strides that have been made in the understanding of LAM have just been amazing. And that's given what a relatively short time it is. So, you know, Frank has talked about that. Jan talked about it in her speech too. As a patient, you know, I feel I'm still quite young. I'm 51. But in my lifetime, you know, there's been transplants, there've been drug treatments. Things have changed immensely, quite apart from the fact that it's obvious that some patients have LAM that affects them in a lesser way than other people. So I think that too is very positive. My tips would be trust in the experts, both in LAM and, if it comes to it, transplantation. We have some of the best doctors in the world dealing on our behalf, and it's fantastic. So, you know, my care has been very good. So trust in the experts. The emotional thing I've covered. I think just be aware that the emotional side effects can be as difficult and debilitating as the physical. I've written down here family. I don't think I realised until way after my transplant the impact that it all had on them as well. And my family have been hugely supportive and continue to be. But I think they kind of sometimes get forgotten when all the focus is on the patient. So be aware and appreciate your loved ones and all that. But the other thing that Helen's mentioned, that Kate's mentioned, that Audrey's mentioned, I think we all think living for the moment is there's no point sitting trying to work out how awful it's going to be further down the line when you don't know that's going to be the case. Just really live for the moment. And I think what I've seen so far today, it's been a really positive day. And I hope you go away with that feeling when you come the end of the day too.